the Saturday Night Live sketch where Will Ferrell portrayed George W. Bush against Daryl Hammond's Al Gore the word strategery. And a lot of people thought that it was W who came up with that word because that's something he would do. But no, it came from Will Ferrell, and they asked, what's the most important, word for this campaign that's going back to 2000? Strategery. So that's one word. This one is the invention of a candidate for governor on the Republican side who joins us live in studio. And the term is Imagineering. I'm going to let him explain it, but he joins us now on Ryan Schuiling Live, John Brooks. You can find out more about his campaign, Brooks for cogov.com, and I'll spell that out because it's radio and we don't have slugs or icons on the television screen for you to see. Brooks, the number 4, COGUV.com. John Brooks, our guest. So, John, Imagineering, that's your term. Have you trademarked it?
No, and when I first came up with it, I realized I hadn't been the first one to come up with it. So okay. It wasn't Will Ferrell, but... So first of all, thanks for having me.
You bet.
Good to be back again. So when I looked at the culture across Colorado that we've created in the last 20, 25 years, it's really been one of offense, defense, and trench warfare. That's what we're seeming to be educating people on both sides right now. And I've always championed a program of Colorado Minds for Colorado Careers where we lead through our own innovations. And, but looking at that, how do we move forward in this culture that we've created? How do we foster something like that? And we also seem to have forgotten that the foundation of leadership in the party or in general is through inspiration. And, who's truly inspiring in the state today? And that you can sit here for a long time and ponder that. I'm probably not going to come up with a great answer. And let's not confuse inspiration with mobilization. All right, we've all in both parties been very focused on mobilizing under the guise of leadership, but we have an opportunity to lead along the high road as a party right now. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody has actually even built that road yet for us to lead on. We have an opportunity to create conversations that inspire. We have an opportunity to foster imagination that leads to innovation, but it seems we really kind of misplaced that imagination in the state. So how do we engineer paths forward without first feeding that imagination? Well, a little bit of a long story to get to it, but my administration will focus every program in my contract with Coloradans around this concept of Imagineering. This is something that came to me late one night as a term. And sure enough, Walt Disney came with the same concept around 1952. So much for me creating a new term. But look at what he created off of that term. Look at where he was able to foster imagination in youth and where he was able to take that dynasty. Now, Disney isn't anything like what it used to be. But if you look back 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, it was something that really brought forth imagination and creativity and drove desires for people to do things. And Colorado really needs to pursue a policy of Imagineering our future. And this fits into every corner of our future when you think about it. Affordability, for instance. We imagine affordable, safe communities. We engineer the path to get there. To be able to do something like that, we'll create statewide investment prospectuses and portfolios that visits every county, every community. We identify strengths, opportunities, past legacies, future goals, resources, ambitions for each one of those. We match those with industry partners through Department of Commerce collaborations and other industry collaborations, and we bring investment in. Those investments build facilities, invest in communities, provide workforce training, strengthen wage growth, stabilize community economies, provide housing ownership and assistance, and foster safe communities. That's Imagineering. We can take that even further into education. In education, we imagine being number 1 nationally in all core competencies. Right now, we're ranked 35th in K-12 performance. I don't want to get better. I want to be number 1. That's where we need to get to. That's what we need to focus on. Well, how do we engineer that? Well, we focus 100% on core competencies. We focus on math, on science, on social studies, which is civics and actual history. We focus on language arts, English. We focus on physical education. We focus on arts like music, drama, theater, those types of things that really round out the minds of people of our youth. We measure success regularly. We don't teach to a test. That's been a critical problem for a long time in many schools. And we'll create a Governor's Cup challenge across all those core areas where we can reward excellence, where we can foster and encourage kids to do those things. Be as healthy as you can be the best in math, be the best in all of those areas. Let's foster that growth, and let's promote internships and encourage vocational pathways. Let's prepare our kids to be internationally competitive and also AI resistive, and that's an important concept to think about. As you know from when we probably talked in the past here, that my belief on education is that our kids need to be internationally competitive. And the reason being is that it's not that our kids are going overseas to get jobs. It's because overseas jobs, those kids are coming here. So, the people that worked for me overseas over my years in international business, those kids in those families were 5 to 7 day a week academic work ethics. And what are they doing? Well, they're coming to the U.S., and I can't blame them. I would too. To come here for those $100,000 to $400,000 a year jobs in technology and science and medicine, they're coming here for that. And I see it walking down the halls of our biggest IT shops in the world. But there's a third competitor in this now, and that's AI. So that's something that we need to make sure that our kids are prepared to be first choice in those jobs, and they're resistive to that new AI entrance. And AI is coming strong right now. And we hold our kids accountable for success. But all of that is Imagineering. That's where we need to be able to inspire. Think about when the last time we thought of something big was in this state. And, a lot of people may say Denver International Airport. That's not bad. But what about a mountain transit system? We've been talking about that for 50 years now, probably longer. But we need to be able to build a mountain transit system that essentially loops from DIA to at least Eagle County, potentially all the way over to Grand Junction. But what's CDOT working on right now? They're repurposing coal train lines to go to Craig from Arvada. I don't know of anybody that wants to go, besides Steamboat and Winter Park, I don't know of anybody who wants to ride a train to Kremlin. So that's what they're doing, But we need to think through, I've traveled over 85 countries, worked on 300 projects all over the world and in international business after I ran public sector agencies. And in that time, I saw transit systems in Asia that were impressive. Why aren't we doing that? We've got a hub and spoke light rail system that, frankly, is so far behind financially and getting worse, and not able to complete Northwest corridors and everything else. They want even another $1.6 billion to pull themselves out of the hole from the last billion that they got, 10 or some odd years ago. And still, we don't have anything that gets people to where they want to go. People land at Denver International Airport; they're 100 miles away from where they want to be. Mm-hmm. Why haven't we Imagineered our way into a new, modern, high-speed, high capacity transit system?
And we've seen the pitfalls of what can be kind of the bridge to nowhere concept, or a boondoggle project in California, where there was supposed to be a bullet train project between San Francisco and Los Angeles. All that money poured into it, and what do they have to show for it? Very little, if anything. In fact, nothing. John Brooks, our guest, GOP candidate for governor. Now, John, just in talking with you, you are inspiring from like a cerebral standpoint. You have a very left-brain, logical approach to how you would kind of govern and organize things and set goals, and the Imagineering concept that you talk about. I just want to get your perspective on the race as it stands right now in no particular order. I guess I'll go alphabetical. Senator Barb Kirkmeyer, along with Scott Bottoms in the General Assembly. You got one from the House, one from the Senate, that are viewed as two of the top competitors in the race. Bottoms being a minister from Colorado Springs, along with representing the 15th District in the House. Senator Barb Kirkmeyer has a wealth of experience legislatively, and then also as the Weld County Commissioner, one of those. You also have Victor Marks, who's a very unconventional candidate. He's raised a lot of money. He's held a lot of rallies. He comes in as the top fundraiser in the race, so he's going to be a mover and a shaker when it comes to all things possible. His ministries generating that kind of rally and support. And then you have Sheriff Jason Mikesell out of Teller County, who's been running a rather stealth campaign. He's done a lot in terms of ground game, grassroots, going to forums, appearing at debates. So when you look at the backdrop of just the four candidates I mentioned, and you trying to mount this challenge and break into that, how have you approached doing that? Where have you gone across the state? Have you encountered these other candidates? What has been your strategy?
I have. I've actually encountered pretty much every one of those candidates thus far, and because I'm doing the same thing. I was in Akron, Washington County just a couple days ago. I was in Salida and Poncha Springs a couple days before that. all over the Denver area. I've been to my home county up in Boulder several times now, and for both town halls and also GOP events. And those town halls, we're reaching out to people that I grew up with that are not GOP. And, it's interesting to go to a town hall when you're one of 3 Republicans in the room and everybody else is not. But the message carries that people are looking for something that isn't going to be mobilizing, but is going to be more inspirational, something that we can all get our arms around. We have Colorado problems right now that are not restricted to a particular party. So we need to be able to build on that and be able to build towards solutions that we can all move towards in that kind of an environment. And right now, if we trench ourselves on either side, we're not going to get anywhere. But back to what you're talking about, I think it's important to note that looking at a background for somebody like myself that has run government agencies back to profitability and off the back of taxpayers, that's actually run international businesses in countries all over the world. Colorado is not a podcast. Colorado is not a church. Colorado is not a legislative chamber. Colorado is not a courtroom. Colorado is an enterprise. At the end of the day, Colorado is competing against 49 other enterprises for federal investment, for industry investment, whether it be national or international. It's competing for water. It's competing for tourism. It's competing for all of these different things. When you go across the spectrum of candidates that we have, not just within the Republican Party, who brings experience to be able to take the nation, take the state forward in competing for those resources, for those investments, for that economic stability for those communities to move forward? Who brings together the conversations of all sides of a conversation, all sides of an issue, to be able to drive towards a conclusion on that? And that's why we really targeted a lot of independents and Democrats in our conversations, because when we go to solve an issue for the state, when we go to solve education, we say we want to be number 1 in education. Great. As governor, I own that goalpost. Who I choose to get there, I choose the right people, not the right party to get us there. I own the goalpost. A Republican governor owns that goalpost. When I say we're going to have an energy renaissance in this state, where we're going to look at small modular nuclear reactors, we're going to look at large format reactors, we're going to completely change the landscape of energy in this state. It's not going to be hard. And if we stop alienating Washington and instead working with the Department of Energy for the funding they're already putting aside for that, we'll actually make that progress. I don't hear any of these other candidates talking about those the same way that we are. So is that a lane that we can actually move forward in? Well, so far it's proved very successful, and it's helped in many different areas, from messaging and acceptance to fundraising. It's all been very, very powerful for us. So could we be argued as being a little stealthy in how we're doing that? Certainly, but I'm doing 3 to 7 events at least per week right now, all over the state. I'm splitting mileage across 3 different vehicles because we're certainly piling them on. But we've been to Alamosa, we've been to Durango, we've been to Cortez, we've been out to Salida, we've been up to Akron. We're heading pretty quickly up to Northeast Colorado again. We've been down to La Junta and Los Animas. We're visiting every single corner of the state. We go to every event we're invited to. Some we've been not necessarily invited to, but we tried to shoehorn our way in anyway, and make sure that people understand that when we look at the spectrum of candidates that we have out there, when you put on the lens of the other 8 out of 10 voters in the state and look at how they view us as candidates, how they view the issues that we're talking about, where do we fall? Where do we come out of that? Because we talk a good talk to our own group. As soon as we get outside our room, where does that message go? And that's what the voters need to decide. The voters need to look at that and say, yeah, I resonate with what they're saying. Or more often than not, for the last 20 years, the voters have said, no, I don't resonate with that. So it's interesting to listen to Phil Weiser not too long ago on Cal Clark. Everybody knows Cal Clark, of course. And him saying that, everybody leans left, even though they've largely moved towards more of that independent and unaffiliated range. Well, okay, but they still left your party. They still left the Democrats. So they may lean left. So is that because they're looking at the alternatives and they're still not feeling inspired enough? They don't have enough inspiration to say, yeah, I believe that leadership isn't scary. That leadership can actually get us into a direction that we as a state can benefit from, and that's the job of a governor. It's not a partisan job. And if it is, we don't win. And we've got plenty of decades of failure in that to show that.
He's John Brooks, candidate for governor on the Republican side. You can find out more about his policy positions and his platform at brooks4cogov.com. That's Brooks, the number 4cogov.com. Kind of the structure and the mechanics of your campaign. You touched on it, touring the state, all these different venues. The fundraising aspect, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that as well, and how you're planning to get on the ballot, because there's a couple different ways that can happen. You can go to assembly and you can get the required number of delegates and support to qualify for the ballot there. And then there's the gathering of ballot petition signatures for your campaign. Can you just take us through the state of your campaign, how you're orchestrating that, and what your final plan is to get on the ballot?
All right. So, first of all, a fair amount to unpack there. Let's start with the assembly piece. That's our plan, is to go through assembly.
Okay.
And certainly I know some candidates are doing a hybrid. They're doing some petitioning as well as assembly. We're right now focusing on assembly, which is why we're putting miles on the vehicles and getting out to everybody we can get in front of. And we want to make sure that we have a chance to have people talk to us, to ask us questions, to understand that our approach is much more pragmatic, that we're much more focused on the abilities of Colorado and how do we foster that, how do we grow that, how do we encourage that, how do we take us forward to fix all of these issues across the state. That's all in my contract for Coloradans that you'll find on my website. Those are all issues that we believe are solid issues. They're winners, and thus far they have been. As a matter of fact, it's fun to go out and talk to the voters, because when I go to an event like down in Durango, I went down and talked to a group down there. Wonderful time. I got to tell you, I'm so glad I'm out of the holidays, because the potlucks were killing me. But it was point. Oh my gosh, it was brutal. And don't get me wrong, it was all delicious. Oh yeah, it was way too delicious. but think about the conversations we had in our group, and I would go out and talk on the streets. I'd go out and talk to the people at the restaurants, the people at the hotels. And some of these people are getting their workers in Durango from Utah because they can't afford to live in Colorado. We're not talking about that as much in our meetings, but on the streets, that's what they're concerned with. I was up in Broomfield talking to some folks here recently, having lunch at a restaurant. We're near one of my old offices, kind of an old stomping ground, and talked to one of the folks there, and they said, they can't stand the traffic and they don't feel safe. And so those are conversations that aren't at the core of what we're talking about for Republicans. Now let's talk about the fundraising side. We didn't really start our fundraising campaign-wise until this year. We wanted to spend last quarter really focusing on messaging and making sure we were understanding and hearing what people are thinking, what they're feeling. I've had my views, being here since I was 7 years old, and I'm nowhere near that now. So we spent an awful lot of time formulating our own opinions and our own points of view, and I've spent a lot of time with a lot of the people that I've spent my entire life around, listening to issues that are near and dear to them. So we had to go out last quarter and really play that message through and get feedback and understand where people are at in those thoughts. And from there, we were able to formulate our direction. And now we're moving into fundraising. We have some very big events coming up. We have one coming up this Saturday. So our fundraising is already several thousand% beyond what it was, because people were throwing money. I don't want to say throwing; they were giving us money very graciously at our campaign last quarter, but it wasn't much, and we weren't asking for much then. But fundraising now becomes very critical, because, as you mentioned, some of these candidates are raising big numbers. They're spending a lot of money to get to those big numbers, right? But they're raising some big numbers. But all the numbers that we've all raised, we're still way far behind from where we're going to need to be collectively. So. Our angle, our strategy, if you will, is look, think long term, think strategically. How are we going to play when we get out to the general?
That's right.
What are we going to do that's going to be able to, again, carry that inspiration, carry that Imagineering concept forward to a statewide audience? How do we get them excited about actually putting a Republican in?
And that is the task at hand. It is a difficult needle to thread. John Brooks attempting to do that as a Republican candidate for governor. His website, Brooks, the number 4cogov.com. A final note here, John, so appreciative of your time and for you coming in to join us live in studio. For those that are hearing you for the first time, they like your ideas. they're looking at your website. They want to check out more about you, but just your background, the 411 on your experience, and what brings you to this point as a candidate for governor.
Right. So, first of all, as I mentioned, I moved to Colorado when I was 7 years old. That was back in 1972. And we were a technology family. We were agriculture and technology. So my grandfather had dairy farms, or a dairy farm actually down in Cortez. We built computers to computerize dairy farms. That ended up being our family's go-forward business. He gave our farm to the Navajo Nation way back then, and scored him an interview with Walter Cronkite back in the day, which is 7 years old. I had no clue how important that was. But for the last several decades, I've served as a chief of emergency services as a paramedic firefighter. Rose to chief in my 30s for two different organizations, both public and private. I was a member of the Air Force Reserves, and for the last 25 years as an executive and CEO in the data technology sector with multinational companies. I was part of a founding group of companies up in the northwest part of the Denver area. That company was bought by a company in London, bought by a company in India. We grew it to 1,000 employees, $100 million run rate. We had a pretty good run. But why am I running? I look at this and say that the state needs fresh visions, fresh views, fresh approaches, fresh faces to be able to tackle the issues that have been really increasingly building in our state. With all this trench warfare that we've been having, we've been shoving these issues aside and not really addressing them appropriately. And as I said, I've never been elected to government, but I have run those government agencies, and I bring that executive experience in both public and private. So leading the enterprise government agencies, I'd mentioned before, back to profitability. When I got there, they were losing money, and the counties were billing them out. But the county was billing them out. Within the first 6 months, we completely brought that into an enterprise model, got it completely off the back of taxpayers. On the public or on the private side, I've run these projects all over the world, and a lot of those projects have been around revenue, cost, and fraud management across companies that have budgets that are 3 times the size of the state of Colorado. And I've done that for hundreds of companies around the world. But I'm not a politician, and in fact, I don't think that's what we need at this time. I think we really need a common Coloradan with some uncommon sense. And that's what I'm going to bring to the table. And over the years, as I watch our roads get worse, our energy become more expensive, our education continue to decline, our policies that are encouraging crime that are being put forth by not only our legislature but also district attorneys, all of those things need to be brought back under some reasonable control. And that's what I focus on. I am not the candidate that's going to campaign on ideology or an emotion. I'm not that guy. If that's what you're looking for, there's plenty of others out there. I'd point you to them. I'm not that guy. So I am focused absolutely on Colorado issues that are going to decrease cost and increase prosperity. That's my focus. I want to go through and lower healthcare costs. I want to lower energy costs. My contract with Coloradans is going after transportation, education, energy, affordability, crime and public safety, resources and sustainability, healthcare, immigration, fiscal health, taxation fairness, legislative reviews for the last 3,000 pieces of legislation that are costing anywhere between $2 and $10 billion more in our state budget, wildfire mitigation, rural protection, digitalization and revitalization, parental rights. I mean, I've got a laundry list, but behind that are pages and pages and pages of plans, because my background as an enterprise guy, that's how I think. That's how we do things. We're in business. We do 20 things at once. We don't do one thing at once. We leave one thing at once to the government. Government doesn't need to work that way anymore.
He is an unconventional candidate in the best possible way, as a business mind coming in. And with that approach, overarching, looking to thread that needle, get onto the ballot and into the general. John Brooks, GOP candidate for governor. Find out more about his campaign. Once again, Brooks, the number 4, COGUV.com. John Brooks, thank you so much for your time here today.
Thank you. Enjoyed being here.